Hello and welcome to the world of stories. I'm sure you're here for a bedtime story to help you drift into sleep. And so, let's begin. The blacksmith anvil had suddenly appeared in the courtyard of the cathedral on Christmas morning. No one knew how it had really got there. The anvil had a sword stuck into it and stood on a huge stone. Words were carved right around it, which read, "Whoever pulls out this sword is the rightful king of the Britons." Many a proud lord had stepped up and tried to pull the sword out of the mysterious anvil, but even though they had heaved and sweated and grunted and pulled and pulled and pulled, all of them had walked away disappointed. Now, almost a week had passed. It was time for the New Year's Eve jousting festival, and still the anvil stood on the stone in the courtyard with the sword sticking out of it. Every year, bold knights came to the capital city from all over the kingdom to ride against each other in the New Year's Eve jousting festival and show off how brave they were. This year, Sir Ector's son, Sir Kay, would joust for the very first time. Sir Ector's younger son, Arthur, was going along too, as Sir Kay's squire. Sir Ector and his sons lived in the very furthest corner of the kingdom, so far away from the capital city that news of the strange anvil hadn't even reached them before they departed. It took them 3 days of hard riding until they saw the towering cathedral spire and the bright fluttering flags of the jousting field in the distance. Then a dreadful thing happened. Sir Kay put his hand down by his side to put his trusty sword, and there was nothing there. "My sword!" Sir Kay gasped. "It's gone!" Arthur turned quite pale with horror. It was the squire's job to make sure that the knight was properly equipped. We must have left it at the lodging house we stayed at last night," he groaned. "Don't worry, Kay. I'll dash back and fetch it." Before anyone could argue, Arthur had wheeled his horse around and was galloping at full tilt back down the road. There wasn't a second to lose. But when Arthur arrived back at the lodging house, there wasn't a sign of Sir Kay's sword anywhere. Arthur raced his horse back to the city, wondering how on earth he was going to break the bad news to his brother. He was very nearly at the jousting field when he galloped past the cathedral courtyard and saw the sword sticking out of the magical anvil on the stone. Arthur reined in his panting horse at once and looked all around him. There was no one about. Everyone was at a jousting competition. It certainly didn't look as if the sword would be missed if he borrowed it for a while. "I promise I'll bring it back later," Arthur murmured out loud to no one in particular. He dashed over the stone, jumped up onto the stone, and grasped the sword. It slid out of the anvil as easily as a needle pulls through cloth. "Gadzooks!" Arthur breathed as he gazed at the mighty jeweled blade in his hands. "This is the most magnificent weapon I have ever seen." Then he remembered that the competition was about to begin. He sprinted back to his horse, leapt into the saddle, and arrived at the jousting field just as the first fanfare were being trumpeted. Sir Kay was astonished at the superb weapon that his younger brother handed him. He and his father had just heard all about the mysterious anvil from the other knights at the jousting competition, and he realized at once where the strange sword must have come from. "See, father," he cried over the crowds, brandishing the sword over his head. "I must be the new king of the Britons." Sir Ector came running at once and gasped at the magnificent weapon in Kay's hand. "How have you got this?" he demanded. Kay's face fell. "Arthur brought it to me," he mumbled. Sir Ector's face was grave. "Who pulled this out of the stone and gave it to you?" he quizzed Arthur. No one," stammered Arthur. Quite a few people had gathered around by now, pointing and shouting and staring, and suddenly he felt very nervous. I pulled it out of the stone myself. I was going to put it back when Kay had finished with it, honest." Sir Ector led Arthur back to the cathedral and into the courtyard, with a huge and excited crowd following hot on their heels. "Put the sword back where you found it, son," he told Arthur. Alright, shrugged the author. He climbed onto the stone and thrust the sword back into the anvil. First, Sir Ector himself tried to pull it out. Then Sir Kay heaved at it with all his might. The sword didn't budge an inch. Now, show us how you did it, son, said Sir Ector, his voice trembling slightly. Everyone held their breath as Arthur stepped up to the anvil. As he pulled the sword out effortlessly, the cheer that went up could be heard all over the capital city and beyond. And that is how a young boy called Arthur, who wasn't even a knight, was crowned King of the Britons, and eventually became the greatest of all the heroes who ever lived in the Celtic lands. That's it for tonight. Thank you for listening. Have a great night. Please like and subscribe if you like my contents. I shall update daily and continue with my best efforts. Good night.